forward, please. Lord, we ask your blessing upon Council, direct and prosperous its deliberations to the advantage of thy glory and to the true welfare of the people for whom we serve. Amen. Amen. On behalf of the Glenelg Shire Council, I respectfully acknowledge the traditional lands and waters of the Gunditj, Jamara, Boandik and Jarbajali people and their respective cultural heritages. I acknowledge the elders past and present here at today's gathering and through them to all Aboriginal people. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people provide an important contribution to Australia's cultural heritage and identity. We respectfully acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait community living throughout the Glenelg Shire and the contribution they make to the Glenelg Shire's prosperity and well-being. Now, councillors, if you just indulge me for a second. As a group, we've recently been on country and had discussions about the acknowledgement of country. And even though we are in a corporate setting, we have got a stipulated statement there. It was also discussed to ideally tie it into our surroundings and the events of the day. So I would like to, if you bear with me, just provide my own acknowledgement to country. So I was actually at Dartmoor Anzac Day the other day and had a guest speaker, Michael Brennan, and I'd like to, I guess, paraphrase his speech. His speech was quite lengthy, so you'll have to bear with me, but I will cut a little bit of it out. So this year, 2023, was also the 70th anniversary the coronation ceremony of the Queen Elizabeth II that occurred just a month before the Korean War armistice was signed in July 1953. The ceremony was announced a year earlier that in 1952, following the death of her father, so that appropriate planning and pageantry could occur over the next 12 months. Now, part of that planning involved gathering representatives of the armed forces throughout the Commonwealth to form an appropriate and colourful escort throughout the streets of London. Now, part of that colour came in deliberate choices made about the servicemen and women who were nominated by their country. Consequently, amongst the ranks of personnel were the Nepalese Gurkhas, the Maoris from New Zealand, the ethnic Africans and various tribal groups, descendants of the fierce Bengal Lancers for Pakistan, famed and respected Fuzzy Wuzzy Angels from Papua New Guinea, First Nations people of Canada, and so on. You probably get the drift. Quite rightly, the Queen acknowledged during her speech at the Westminster Abbey, and I won't do her accent, "I have behind me the living strength and majesty of the Commonwealth of Empire, of societies old and new, of lands and races different in history and origins, but all united in spirit and in aim. And yet, amongst those races and old societies represented, there was not one Aboriginal nominated amongst the Australian contingent of 250. You might go, okay, so what? Who cares? Who would they send anyway? Well, there's a bloke from down the road that comes in. Captain Reg Saunders, Gunditj Jamara man, was a gun soldier and outstanding leader. Born in Perham in 1920 and educated at Lake Conda State School, he worked as a sawmiller and played football for Milltown as a youth against Dartmoor and Winnip. Along with his brother Harry, Reg enlisted in action for World War II in April 1940, even though Indigenous Australians were officially not allowed to enlist in the second AIF as they were not recognised as Australian citizens. He was following the example of his previous generations who fought in World War I, including his father Chris and Uncle Reginald, who was awarded the military medal for his bravery. But a few months, young Reg was promoted to sergeant, went overseas and fought against the Italian and German forces in North Africa and mainland Greece. Then Reg's battalion took on the ill-fated campaign in Crete, in mainland Greece. Then Reg's battalion took part of forced to evacuate, there was neither enough time nor ships to transport them, and 3,000 Australian soldiers, including Reg, were left behind. Now, he remained on the island for the next 11 months and, helped by a local family, dodged capture by the German forces. He finally escaped and soon returned to Australia, where he began his training for jungle warfare in the Japanese in the Pacific. In the late 1942, Saunders learnt that his younger brother Harry had been killed in bitter fighting that had taken place towards the end of the Kokoda campaign. Now, the following year, Reg was in New Guinea, where he soon selected for officer training. Graduating as a lieutenant, he was the first Indigenous serviceman to be commissioned as an officer, a fact heavily promoted of the PR section of the Army. Reg commanded a platoon of 30 men and eventually copped a bullet in the knee that slowed him down temporarily. Now, Lieutenant Colonel Henry Gunn said of him, "He was one of the best officers to ever served under me. More than that, he was one of the finest men I've ever met." Reg remained active until the war's end and returning to civilian life. And yet, immediately post-war, work was hard to find for Reg. He got no favours as a returned soldier. So he applied to join the British occupation forces in Japan, however, was rejected because he was still not of European descent. Now that rule changed in 1949. So when the Korea War broke out in 1950, Reg re-enlisted and became the first Aboriginal to attain the rank of captain, leading a company of 100 men. In April 1951, his unit fought a fierce battle at Kapamyong, helping to bring the rapidly moving Chinese and North Korean forces to a temporary halt. That earned the company a United States Presidential Distinguished Unit Citation for extraordinary heroism and outstanding performance. Now, Reg turned down the individual decoration for his role in the battle. He had a good-natured sense of humour. When a fellow officer remarked that Korea was no place for a white man, Reg replied it was no place for a black man either. While Saunders was fighting in Korea, his wife and children were forced to live in a rat-infested single room in a condemned house in a slum street of Fitzroy at that stage. When their plight became known, many people came to help. One of them was Mr. D. McMaster, who offered them a house in Ringwood, and who said of Saunders, "I knew him in the army. He was one of the best blokes I'd ever met." Reg's biographer, Harry Gordon, an Australian journalist in Korea, wrote of him, "He was accepted unreservedly by the men who served with him because false values do not flourish among frontline soldiers." Now, Captain Saunders returned to Australia and was still in the regular army in the lead up to the Queen's coronation. And yet, when the invitations were set out in late 1952 for the Australian Services section of the Queen's escort, Reg was not on that list. It seemed he would miss a seat at the table, as it will. Odd, because apart from his service record and public profile, he was the right colour and standout. Remember, the Queen chose people of colour for the Commonwealth countries deliberately. The national reaction was swift and widespread. In 1953, the 39ers Association, so that's men who were enlisted for service in World War II in 1939, requested the federal government to include Reg. Victorian RSL persuaded the federal executive to support the view. Australia could not choose a better representative for her natives than Captain Saunders. New Zealand will send Maori representatives, and if we don't send at least one Aboriginal, it will give rise to the questioning of an unfavourable comment overseas. Now, on February 26, 1953, the leader of the opposition, Dr. Everett, questioned Liberal Prime Minister Menzies in Parliament and requested an invitation to be extended to Captain Reginald Saunders. Now, there's several letters to the editor, which I won't read out. However, when quizzed about the public reaction and demands for his inclusion, Reg simply voiced, "I'd be proud to attend." But in March, the Minister of Defence doubled down and repeated the official reason given for the decision not to include Reg. The size of the contingent is limited to 250 and cannot be increased, as it would mean rejecting a brother officer already selected. And there is no reason to alter the composition of the contingent. The Queen's coronation escort of marching service personnel was 30,000 people strong. The line 3.2 kilometres long, and they couldn't put one more person in there. There's a bit more that goes on about Reg, but I'll cut to the chase. 1971, Queen Elizabeth II awarded him a member of the Order of the British Empire for his commitment to raising the profile of Indigenous communities. And I wonder if she knew that he'd been snubbed for the position of the coronation celebrations. Reg was appointed to the Council of the Australian War Memorial in 1985. He died in 1991, aged 70. His ashes were spread at Tayrak. A ceremony in 2015 at the Australian War Memorial named a gallery in his honour, the only one dedicated to an individual. Only one person is going to have his name on anything inside the Australian War Memorial, that's Reg Saunders. And that was the director, Brendan Nelson, who said that. Now, Reg's likeness is now strikingly painted on the Hayward Water Tower, looking east over his country, and those who have come later. So when people ask why we need to do an acknowledgement of country, it's for those reasons. Thank you, councillors. Item 4, to those present in the gallery today. By attending the public meeting of the council, you are consenting to your image, voice and comments being recorded and published. Council meetings may be live streamed and the CEO will enable a copy of the recording to the public. Receipt of apologies, we have Neil. Question time, we have questions taken on notice from the previous meeting, which are outlined on pages 3, 4, 5 and 5. 6.2, questions from the gallery. So there are quite a few questions from the gallery. So we'll start in no particular order. Mr. CEO. Mr. Jowett. Mr. Jowett.
Good evening. I have been approached by a number of elderly residents who either don't drive or who don't have access to a trailer. They've all been asking me the same question about the council green waste bins. Could you please provide an update on the rollout of green waste bins and what is the current timeline for their introduction?
Thank you, Mr. Jowett. It's actually a topic that's been discussed in our budget at the moment, so it was very timely for that question. There is a state government requirement to have those bins in by 2030. For this budget in particular, it was a very lean budget, so there's not slated to be budgeted for this financial year coming. However, the budget is obviously going out for public consultation, so if people do want to see those bins in, I hope they provide that feedback.
Fantastic, thank you. Question 2, could you please provide the council's position on the future of the Heritage Grant Scheme? Is the council planning on continuing to fund this scheme, and if so, by how much annually?
Thank you, Mr. Jowett. Obviously in the budget, which is being released tonight, it may not mention actually in there, but yes, we are. We are continuing the scheme. I believe $10,000 annually is being contributed to the scheme. There's obviously funding requirements to apply for it. And I believe at this stage it's a first come, first serve, unless Mr. Hull has anything to add to that. That is correct. Thank you, Mr. Hull. Next question.
Thank you. Final question. On page 77 of the draft budget, in section 2.5, could you please provide a more detailed breakdown on exactly what benefit this community gets for the $3.8 million that is being planned on being spent in areas of digital Glenelg, information technology and information and data management?
Thank you, Mr. Jowett. Obviously that is in the budget, but I will pass it over to the CEO to provide some further comment for you.
Thanks for the question, Mr. Jowett. So, as you've identified, there's 3 distinct units there. Some of the expenses are obviously salaries for each of those 3 components, but in a broader sense about those projects, we have a business transformation project that we've committed to over a number of years in this budget. We're rolling out, digitalised forms, procurement processes, some Power BI reporting across all those platforms. Obviously, one of our areas that we're concentrating around our payroll, finance, our HR system. So we're midway through implementing what's called PEARL, which is Performance, Engagement, Recruitment and Learning System. So it's a whole new suite of tools to enhance our performance and reporting and knowledge, all those areas. Particularly also in data management, we've, looking at our exposure to cyber attacks, our collection, retention, disposal of all our records management in line with the Office of the Victorian Information Commissioner, so we've got legislative requirements there. So quite a comprehensive suite of things that we need to do in that space, and particularly to be more contemporary and have those systems talking to each other, but more importantly give us a function to be able to press a button and take a report out to do that.
That would be great. Thank you.
Good job. Martin. Thank you, Mr. Boyer.
Yep, no worries, thanks. My question's around an old report or input they asked for the community. So back in 2018-19, Council put out for public input on comments their urban tree policy. We received acknowledgement of our submission, but no one has ever seen a draft of the outcome of the public inputs. So I'm just wondering what happened to all the public submissions, and were any of these inputs from the public implemented? And also, if nothing was done with the public inputs from 2018-19, will the council be putting the policy out for public comments, seeing it's due for review this year in July?
Thank you for your question, Martin. Obviously, that was a little bit before my time. So what I will do is hand over to Mr. Saunders, who possibly might be able to provide some comment there. Otherwise, you might have to take that on notice.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Boyer. And
No, or not.
thank you for your question, Mr. Boyer, and through the Mayor. Yes, urban tree policy was around the 2019 mark, and it is due for review in 2023, so that'll be July this year. I understand the consultation done at the time. There was some extensive consultation, everything was considered in that, but the policy itself was quite a light document committing to high ideals. We also put out our vegetation management guideline in 2021, which was via your say Glenelg as well, and we received a lot of comments back on that, and they were incorporated into the document. We don't have an official, this was the outcome of consultation, but as we go into the next round of reviews, there'll be an opportunity to reconsult again.
Thank you, Mr. Saunders. While we're on a roll, Rick Gresham, you've got a copy, yep.
Thank you. Good evening. I would like to know why the mature and apparently healthy Alocasharina verticillata, which was removed from the corner of Glenelg Street and Cape Nelson Road during 2020 at the time of the COVID shutdown, and also were local residents notified by the council before the tree was removed?
Well, Mr. Saunders, I'll give that, probably split that up into two questions.
Thank you for your question, and through the Mayor. I'm not aware of specific circumstances of a tree removal in 2020, but I'll have to take that on notice and I'll get back to you with what happened at that time.
Thank you.
And third question.
And another question, why does the council plant exotic street trees in Portland, such as magnolia species, rather than more appropriate endemic species?
Thank you for your question. Thank you for your question, Rick. I'll pass that to Mr. Saunders again.
Thank you for your question again. We typically try to plant or replant with indigenous species where we can. However, sometimes in the streetscape sense, they do have ones that aren't endemic to the area.
Thank you for your questions, Mr. Saunders, while you're on a roll. Helen?
My friend is going to speak.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, Sally, yes, Sally's going to speak on your behalf. That's not a problem.
Thank you for this opportunity, councillors and council. Thank you. Yes, Helen's asked me to ask a question on her behalf. Why has a canopy, and I'll specify that's a tree canopy, at Fourth Lock Lagoon Reserve been allowed to decline so significantly over the years and minimal maintenance of the area? Okay. So
Mr. Saunders. You got a busy time, Mr. Saunders?
Thank you for your question, and for your questions, I should say, and through the Mayor. I don't have any specific details on the canopy decline at the Fourth Rock Lagoon, but I understand the group Southwest, I've forgotten the rest of the group, SWE was the acronym. We'll be working or communicating with council about what we can do in that area to get our plans in order.
Beautiful. That one there. Ronwick. Mr. Saunders.
I'm from Petrie. We've got Petrie on me, but I'm from.
Oh, Petrie, sorry.
Okay, that's
There's
me,
a few.
sorry. Yeah, the purple crown lorikeet and musk lorikeet are blossom migrants that seasonally visit our streets and gardens. They rely on the nectar from flowering gums and the Portland street trees, particularly the New Zealand Christmas bush and the Norfolk Island hibiscus. The annual visits of these birds add to the biodiversity of the Glenelg Shire. Our street trees are an important ingredient to their survival. Like many of our now extinct species, we take away their food and they die. Why are we cutting these trees down? Seems very odd that all of the Norfolk Island hibiscus in Otway Street and the two in Percy Street were deemed to have structural issues at the same time, they're 60-year-old trees, and were cut down at the same time. The Glenelg Shire 2040, our Future Together community plan and vision recommends. They develop targets for the conservation of natural assets, replanting, rehabilitation and wildlife corridors. The ratepayers should have faith in these forward planning strategies, and our wildlife depend on it. With destroying these corridors, then we're replacing them with ornamental pears. None of those birds eat that. Why aren't we following the Glenelg Shire 2040, our Future Together plan?
Mr. Saunders, provide some commentary on that.
Thank you for your question, and there's certainly a theme happening tonight. I will just note, we do have an environment strategy that is due for review, and there will be quite an extensive engagement process and consultation process with that. It would probably be best if concerned residents and ratepayers such as yourselves, we could set up a meeting where we actually go through all these concerns for direct input into that at the start, and then as we go through it. I can't specifically answer the question about those trees, other than the ones that we have removed, there were arborist reports and there were structural issues with them. We did do those arborist reports, probably very similar timeframes, and they found those. That's about the best I can answer them.
Thank you, Brendan. Yvonne. Mr. Saunders. Oh, no, me.
Hi. I have a few questions. Just to follow up from Rick's a little bit question, does Portland Council have any guidance from any environmentalists, scientists or botanists specialising in native Indigenous plants for this area in order to give good advice on the appropriate plants to grow on nature strips, foreshores and parks? Just because some of those trees that are getting replanted on nature strips are really inappropriate, such as like the dwarf magnolia. They just cannot stand the salty winds here. They just don't grow, so it's a lot of money wasted, time, when we could have a more Indigenous plant for this area that would thrive. So, yep. Just that's one question. So I don't know if you want to answer
Saunders, I
that
think you
now.
can probably take that one there.
Thank you for your first question. We do have, as part of our vegetation management guidelines, a tree species selection. It is very broad because we're trying to encompass the entire Shire. I think as a part of the revision of that, we'd probably try and tailor that down to specific areas. As a part of that, we went through EVC, biodiversity parts that were in there, and we actually engaged with DELP at the time, to try and develop that. So yes, we did have some experts in the area. It's because of the broadness of the area, we probably need to tailor that back down to specific areas where certain ones are suitable and others may not be.
As scientists around the world are telling us, we need urgently to, due to climate change, we need to green our world. So I'm just wondering what plans the council has to promote the greening of Portland. More trees. Yeah, so because I'm sort of feeling and seeing that there's less trees. So I'm just wondering what sort of plan you have, if you have a greening plan.
I guess I can take that on rather than Mr. Saunders, unless you would like to add to that. I guess as a council, yes, climate change is certainly something we consider. We do have, a lens on that when we do make some decisions. We're talking all the time at the moment about green energy solutions that will be in the Shire as well. So for our particular Shire, I'd like to think, the centre of Australia here when it comes to potential green energy sources. But as for the tree policies and that, yes, we do look at them. But we do have a lens over that, if that makes sense. Third question?
I have one more.
The last one, yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, just one more that was very much linked to my last question.
Sorry.
And your answer was, I was just wondering if wanting to know if the council is considering following any other cities or suburbs, such as like Adelaide, St Kilda, Parksville, Canterbury, Ivanhoe, Bentley, just a few, who have actually rated really highly environmentally focused, having a high level of tree coverage which attracts tourists and new residents looking for quality of life town to live in. So when you go to places like Adelaide, you very notice the tree coverage is amazing. So I just thought maybe you might have, have that sort of view or not.
What I might do, Yvonne, is pass that over to the CEO, who might be able to provide some additional insight.
Thank you for the question. I think certainly picked up a very consistent theme tonight from this group, and we're, as Mr. Saunders indicated, we'd be quite keen when we review our urban tree planting policy, our environmental strategy, all those type of things. I think there's certainly a clear message around some further engagement, looking at best practice, and we'll have a record of all those in attendance tonight that we'll make sure that we consult and invite you for input into those strategies as they're reviewed and a joined up approach to address this issue.
Sally.
Yes.
Go again.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm not sure if I need this. I have a fairly loud voice. Yes, there is a little bit of a theme here this evening. Generally concerns along these lines. Now, you talked about a consultation process, Chris. I was actually involved, and my name's actually in the front of this document, in 2040, and even though I was in lockdown, stuck in Melbourne, I still did through Zoom and various things, and my main input was, we're starting on page 58, our natural environment, and one of the things that we specifically related to was tree cover, selection of trees in the region. And I'll quote from this document, which was very comprehensive. There was a lot of input from people, a lot of people put a lot of their time. So when it says use native vegetation for street and open space planting, one would hope that that was going to be adhered to. Now, this document is up for review next year, so this isn't actually directly my question, but right, in 2020, you asked the Glenelg Shire community to participate in the Glenelg Shire 2040 Community Plan and Vision. Part of that plan, outlined on page 58, was, as I said, the use of native vegetation, excuse me, for street and open space planting. Why, therefore, does Council persist in the use of inappropriate ornamental pears and magnolias, neither of which are native to Australia, let alone southwest of the coast? I'm a qualified horticulturalist, and I can assure you they are very inappropriate for our community.
Thank you, Sally. I'll take that. Mr. Saunders, if you're... I've got to give you a bit of a break there. Right. Yeah. Mr. Saunders?
Thank you for your question, and through the Mayor, I guess the main thing with that is the document, the Community Plan 2040, that was done in 2020. Our policies are probably a little bit behind that at the moment. So as a part of those reviews, they will definitely be taking into account the considerations that are in that, and as we update them, they'll all align a lot better. The specific trees that have been planted in some of the, I'll say the Percy Street streetscape, in the middle in particular, where there's some I'll say non-Indigenous type trees. That was more around streetscape considerations. But as I said, as a part of revising all the policies that we have, it'll be aligning with the community plan or vision. I think that one is correct.
Which, Sally, might lead into your next question, which I will actually answer this one.
Read mine, saying I read hers. Yeah, the second question was the Glenelg Shire 2040 Community Plan and Vision a legislated, ratified resolution, so did you pass it here as a motion, passed by Council requiring adherence to its recommendations, or was it a PR consultation progress with no legal standing? So do you actually have to adhere to your community plan and vision? Or
Thank you for your question, Sally. Yes, it is actually a local government requirement, I should say, sorry. And we actually use that document to feed into it. So we'll feed into that with our 4-year plan, feed into it with our 10-year financial plan, 4-year financial plan. So we refer back to that 2040 plan consistently with our documents. So this council has, the next council will as well. So we're not paying lip service to it. And I think Mr Saunders sort of articulated there, the policy is a little bit behind. So when it does get updated, I believe this year you said, that will then feed into that as well. So the 2040 plan, as you quite rightly said, that was deliberative engagement where the community feeds back to the council. And we're just caretakers of that council for these 4 years. And that's what we want to carry out, and that's what we will carry out.
I'm busting to ask why then you're in contravention of it by planting ornamentals now, which you'll have to review and see that they were the wrong trees.
So that's review of the policy, so we'll do that.
We won't go into all that. My final question was, does council asset management team factor in the monetary value of mature trees in the urban environment, as do other councils throughout Victoria, for their contribution to air quality, particularly filtration regards to heavy vehicle pollutants, and seeing we're one of the highest freight routes now in Victoria, that's very relevant. Dust mitigation, shade amenity, windbreaks, all our contribution trees make to the overall health of the community. A mature tree has a standing asset value of over $150,000 according to the Nursery and Garden Industry of Australia. And I said I can provide, as I said here, I can provide details of that. So other councils actually factor in the asset of a mature tree in its contribution to the community's health, amenity, etc. Does council do that at all here with your asset management?
I'll pass that over to Mr Saunders.
Mr Saunders, okay.
Who's asset instructor?
Thank you for your question. And through the Mayor, I'm not sure of the actual asset management value that is listed for the specific trees. I know that we've been going through a mapping exercise to get every tree listed, which is the first start of that. So then we can do condition reports and inspections on them as we go through. I'll take the bit on notice around what value we actually attribute to them, and if there is no value, what we're proposing to do about that in the future.
Thank you, Sally. Ms Nevis. There we go, rather than Bronwyn.
Hello. I'm on the same theme. I'd just like to preface my questions, though, by reference to the CEO mentioning a consultation process in future, given the group and how the intention is to consult with people. I'm hesitating because I'm not quite sure how to express it. This has happened many times before. People come to council with these same issues. I've been doing it for 20 years and we get ignored. You know, we say that we were told there's going to be a meeting, we'll be invited and nothing happens. So I really look forward to it happening in the future. My question is, in recent years, the tall green amenity in the town, i.e. trees, have slowly and stealthily been disappearing. Many of these trees are the Laguna, which are Norfolk Island hibiscus, already mentioned, and the Pahutakawa, which is the New Zealand Christmas tree. Both those species are Gondwanan species, so they fit in with the birds and animals of this part of the world, this hemisphere. The fact that it might be from New Zealand or Norfolk Island doesn't matter. Our birds still love them. I want to know if the council has a policy of removing all these species.
We'll pass it off to Mr Saunders. Just before I do the commentary on the engagement with council, there's a requirement of this the Local Government Act 2020 to actually have that engagement. So that wasn't in the Act previously, where it is now. So it's heavily focused on that community engagement and getting that feedback from the community. So I know you may have angst from, you mentioned 20 years ago, different acts. So we can look forward to that engagement. So, Mr Saunders.
Thank you for your question, Bronwyn. Through the Mayor. The brief answer to that is we don't have a mandate to remove a specific species of tree.
I know Glenelg Shire Council did, and most of them were removed from Port Fairy, and I was suspicious that Portland might be going the same way, because many of the trees that have been removed are those two species.
No, if we had that as a policy statement, it would be within our current policy that everybody has access to.
Question number 2.
Often the response given for the removal of trees is that they've been compromised, which you've already mentioned. What does compromise mean, and why can't the public be made aware of what the issues are when these trees are removed, so that they don't have to go running out in the street and shouting at people, cutting them down?
Fair enough. Obviously that is an arborist report, but Mr Saunders will hopefully provide some more clarity on that.
Okay, thank you for your question. I'm definitely getting a few tonight, aren't I? So I've seen a couple of the arborist reports. It's not one that I specifically deal with operationally. They cite reasons. Some were grubs, or it would be structurally unsound. Happy to reach out with our works manager and the Parks and Gardens team leader, and they can actually take you through some of those reports if you like.
Could they not be helped? Like the whole boat in the church in Percy Street was dying 20 years ago, and that tree was helped to survive. So with our trees maybe being compromised, why can't they be helped? Pruned back judiciously or whatever. Sorry.
We'll call that part of question 3 then.
This is not my other question.
Thank you for your part A of that question, or part B. So I actually did ask that question on a couple that I'd seen, and it was seen that to actually, I can't remember the terminology, but to balance them out or to actually try and help them, it would make it even worse structurally sound. But we're not of the view that we just remove a tree if there's any issue with it. We would actually, in our first protocol, try and help it if the arborists recommended that.
I've just got a little one at the end, so if you don't mind.
Okay.
Thank you. Can adjacent landholders or residents request the removal of trees because it impedes their view? And why can't the value of the tree to the general public be more of a priority, if that's the case?
Mr Saunders.
Thank you for your question. And through the Mayor, that wouldn't be a reason that we would remove a tree based on view. I guess people of the public can ask for that, but it wouldn't be a deciding factor for us. And I guess the value question links back into the asset management value that we had just before as well. And as part of our environment strategy and our policies, that'll definitely be quite prominent in those areas.
All good. Thank you for that. Mr Punton.
Okay, my first question is about the Force Rock Lagoon Bridge. The matter of repairs and maintenance on this structure was raised by concerned ratepayers about 3 years ago. It seems to be that preventative maintenance has not been performed in a timely manner on community-owned assets. And as it seems to be the norm in the Glenelg Shire Council, that timely and proactive maintenance has been replaced by total replacement. Two possibilities come to mind as to why this is the case. Either the planning of preventative maintenance is failing, or the ratepayers are being used as an unlimited cash cow to cover the lack of accountability. Can you please provide the total cost of the bridge replacement?
Thank you, Mr Punton. Just before I head to Mr Saunders with some costings, budget tonight with regards to assets and their maintenance. That is a topic as a council group we've been talking about, our asset renewal ratio, which is quite important to upkeep the assets that we do have. As you stipulated, we do have finite resources, so that's a struggle that all councils, regional councils especially, have to wrestle with. But as for this particular instance here, I'll pass to Mr Saunders if he does have any costings, otherwise he might take that one on notice as well.
Point of order, Mr Mayor. Before we proceed, our 30 minutes of question time has expired, and I'll move that that question time be extended for 15 minutes.
Thank you, Mr Wilson.
Happy to second.
Fantastic. Sorry, Mr Saunders.
All those in favour?
All those in favour? Sorry, I should say that. Carried.
Thank you for your question, Mr Punton, and through the Mayor. That particular bridge, there was a report done about 5 years ago outlining some preventative maintenance that could be done, but still highlighting that it was structurally, it would need to be replaced within 5 years. So we're actually acting on that. In terms of the actual cost of the project, I don't have that information at hand. I will take that on notice and get back to you.
Your second question, Mr Punton.
Okay, this is regarding the IT system, and it's a follow-up. Is the Glenelg Shire Council IT system fully functioning and usable? And if so, can you provide answers to my 3 previous questions regarding positions and numbers of employees in those positions?
Okay, Mr Punton, I'll hand that one over to the CEO, and obviously he has provided an answer to that question previously, but with regards to the functionality.
Thank you, Mr Punton. As a previous question, I'd highlighted there were some reporting issues with the current system. It is actually a manual process to get the level of detail, and I believe we've provided a response at previous council meetings around the level of what we can just provide as a report versus tasking an administrative or staff member to go and get that level of detail. That is why we are embarking on this whole transformation process. That's the key to it.
Okay.
And your third question, Mr Punton.
Third question is to do with heritage assets within the Glenelg Shire Council. Can the Mayor inform the ratepayers as to the location of the bluestone guttering and building materials that belong to the ratepayers?
Maybe some more clarification on that, Mr Punton. The bluestone, that's...
Okay, the Glenelg Shire Council have a large quantity of bluestone guttering and building materials somewhere, and it seems to be not where it was, and I want to know where it is and where it's gone. It's the ratepayer's asset for repairing bluestone buildings and gutterings within the Shire, so where has it gone?
Okay, that one, obviously, I'll have to pass over to the CEO. Oh, it's Mr Saunders' assets, sorry. Director of Assets, Mr Saunders. That one.
Thank you for your question again, Mr Punton, and through the Mayor, I'll need to chase down that information and come back to you with that.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions, Mr Punton. Mr Humble.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Question 4 I'm referring to. Just want to draw council attention to an old Chinese proverb: the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. There's an economic reality under the current climate of an increasing gap and disparity between nominal and real wages and disposable income. In other words, we have a community with a diminishing purchasing power. It's indisputable that price increases for essential items and utilities has put an extraordinary upward pressure on household disposable income, and we're seeing these anomalies never more so than with those with fixed and low incomes, which actually comprises a very large percentage of our community. With this in mind, Council has an opportunity with this next budget to have a serious look at their commitment to our community. And we really do expect you to show leadership and to proactively consider implementing austerity measures that will enable Council to re-examine its expenditure priorities and to then freeze or wind back the budget projections and to be a contributor towards alleviating the financial pain that our community is experiencing. I refer to the promise by Councillor Rank on the 28th of June 2022, where she stated that the 2022 budget would do no harm. I would dispute that, because there have been several reports already in regional papers over the last month that's actually identified that the community is experiencing unprecedented levels of harsh financial struggles, evolving homelessness, anxiety and mental health challenges. The callousness of an ill-thought-out 21-22 budget has been a primary factor of the stress in our community. This community does not need the crocodile tears or what's turned out to be empty assurances, but what's needed is an apology to the community for the harm that's been caused as a direct result of the budget, and which has resulted in placing an unprecedented degree of financial and psychological pressure and hardship on families. The harm caused by those financial pressures has been highlighted in regional papers, as I've already stated. So it's quite apparent that there is a huge responsibility now on Council to undo much of the harm caused by last year's budget. Assuming, Mr Mayor, that you and your Council have a vision to proactively implement a community-friendly budget for 23 and 24, recognising the unparalleled damage caused, how can you undo the damage that has been caused and continues to impact on members within our community?
Thank you for that question. Again, it's Mr Hum. That's some of the assumptions that obviously you're making. And it's our responsibility, our financial responsibility, to, I guess, do no harm to this council as well and to the future generations of this community. So when we do put a budget together, a lot of those factors you're talking about, mental health, those are things that council does carry out. Now, there is finite resources that council does have. So you're saying we need to cut back. Well, then those very resources that are helping those people that are struggling, they're the ones that are going to be possibly cut back. And that's not something that I'm willing to do. Now, I'm willing, with the budget is going out, as you know, tonight. If you'd like to provide input to that, that'd be fantastic. So next question is...
I don't want to talk about specific budget issues tonight.
So, Mr Hum,
that's not the time.
That's the answer to the question. So your next question, sir?
It's not the time. Okay, question 5. Councillor Martin, I'm interested in the apparent disparity in infrastructure and expenditure that focuses towards improving or establishing infrastructure and services for the elderly for our community. We've seen over the last 2 years considerable funds used to construct a monolith at the entry of the town, for which Council refuses to disclose the actual final expenditure figure. A range of sporting and recreational facilities have been created for the younger members of our community, which is fine. You know, that's we can see that's a vital part of community life. And yet Council seems to be unable to find a few dollars to provide seating along the foreshore and at the cliff tops that would enable older people and maybe some of the not so older people, members of the community, to rest and enjoy their surrounds. The 2023 budget, from what I've just had a look at briefly, is once again found to be lacking in detail in terms of providing or improving amenity for the older members of the community. So, Mr Mayor, I want you to explain the council philosophy behind this generational disparity, otherwise known as ageism, in the allocation of infrastructure and amenity funding.
Thank you for your question, Mr Hum. What I will say is you highlighted, obviously, sporting arenas, sporting ovals, sporting facilities. They're not limited to young people, sir.
I understand that.
So older people do use those facilities as well. However, you do hit the nail on the head. Our asset renewal ratio is not fantastic. So that leads to Mr Punton's question about the bridge. The council's disparity in what it needs to be financing for its renewals is a lot less than what it should be. So that's something that, as a mayoral group, we need to address over this year, this financial budget, but also future budgets as well, because that's important. So maintaining our assets is important. Now, you mentioned, obviously, specifically looking for elders, members of the community. The budget, when the budget does go out tonight, the budget itself, provide that feedback. What do the elder community want to see? Now we've got, I think, 50,000, maybe 100,000 set aside for footpaths, for easy access for mobility for older residents. We've got the the Merino, the footpaths, the pathways project as well, stage 2 for Merino, for older residents to use, younger residents as well, anyone to use. So what I would suggest is, while I can understand your feedback there, I would ask for the feedback from the community. We need that feedback from the community to provide us councillors with guidance on what the community wants. And that's what I would say there, sir.
Just wondering whether it's the squeaky wheel that gets the attention. That's really the guts of that question.
Mr. Hum, I can't disagree. That's why that saying is there.
Yeah.
So we ask, and I'll go over the last couple of years. I think over the last 2 years, there's been no. Mr. Hum, let me finish. Sorry.
Not a criticism of you guys, I'm just saying.
I just want to highlight the fact over the last 2 budgets, we've had one feedback from a person wanting to do something in the community and assets. So that's what we're after. We're after that feedback. And I would hope you'd submit that feedback, Mr. Hum, too.
Well, that's what council meetings are for, and where we can come and provide that feedback and ask those questions.
But what I would like to say, and I don't want to get into debate here, sir, is that, sorry?
Point of order.
Yep.
Can we please get back to questions?
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
It's time for third question.
Okay, question 1 we'll go to. Just want to draw attention to the transcripts of 2 brief exchanges of correspondence sent to me, one by yourself and the other by Deputy Mayor Jaden Smith. The narrative of both is consistent in that both of you state that you're committed to the 21-25 4-year plan. It's of interest that the 4-year plan was discarded by Councillor Smith, supported obviously by yourself, Councillors Rank and Councillor Hooker, barely 12 months later when the 22 budget was put forward. Mr Howard Templeton in January, the January meeting, pointed out clearly that the budget paper of June 22 was flawed, as have numerous other residents, including Mr Nick Harvey and Mr Kevin Stark, at various times over the last 6 months. The dilemma here is an apparent inability to understand basic principles of how percentages are calculated, differentials between two numbers, and it leads to a number of potential conclusions. Firstly, that Deputy Mayor Smith may have knowingly proposed a flawed budget.
So, Mr Hum, what I'll do is I'll stop you there and not refer to specific councillors. If you have a question with regards to that...
the councillor who proposed the 22 budget did so knowing that it was flawed. In that case, that is problematic and has compromised how the community actually perceives that councillor.
So again, Mr Hum, you are making comments on individuals on this council.
No, I didn't. No,
yeah, Mr Hum, you've mentioned his name, so let me finish, sir. As part of the rules for question time, that you're not allowed to do that. So if you do continue to do that, I'll have to ask you to sit down.
Okay. Secondly, both you and Councillor Smith committed in that correspondence to me to follow the 4-year plan. And thirdly, the most importantly, that the 4-year plan sets the rate income budget figures at $27.626 million. That was adopted. 22-23, it was 27.964. That was rejected and replaced with a 31.393 million, resulting in an excess of 3.429 cash grab. And the council's officially published 22-23 4-year projection and entitlement. Now, this does not equate to the 1.75% increase across the Shire, as you have repeatedly stated, but in fact it's significantly more. The 4-year plan shows the rate income for 23-24 to be projected to 28.326 million, but by using the magical numbers from the 22 amended budget figures, it now will become 32.492 million, which is an excess of 4.17 million from last year. I put it to you, Mr Mayor, that as a demonstration of your collective integrity, that both you and the other councillors are in fact obligated to honour your word, and in particular those who corresponded.
Mr Hum, your question would be, sir?
Yes, it's coming.
Well, I'd like to
allow me
have
the
the
latitude
questions,
that you've allowed other speakers. Thank you very much.
Mr Hum, if you're not part of...
For indeed it's known that a man is only as good as his word.
Point
So
of order,
both of
Mr.
you...
Mayor.
So, Mr. Hum, if you...
There are time frames in place, and we have been very lenient. So, Mr. Mayor, I would request that you advise the Speaker to adhere to the time frames and ask the question. Thank you.
So, Mr. Hum, your question, sir. And
Okay,
again, if you're
so
unable to...
what I'm calling on you to do is to confirm whether you are going to adhere to your commitment to the four-year plan, or if not, if you are not willing to commit to it, under what circumstances, Mr. Mayor, do you believe it is appropriate for political and/or community leaders to lie to the community that they are tasked with serving?
Okay, Mr. Hum, thank you for that long question. What I will do is I'll focus on the point here where you say about a 4-year plan and the actual increases, the percentage increases from the ratepayers. Now, we're actually having that discussion tonight. When a 4-year plan is actually created, done, we need... Yeah, hey, Mr. Hum, let me finish, sorry, sir.
The question was in the last statement.
So, Mr. Hum, you've said, I'm going through the question you've put here and the information you've got here. So, of the 4-year plan, we obviously do not know what the state government rate capping is going to be set 2, 3, 4 years in advance. No one obviously knows that. The state government doesn't even know that. So what we need to do, or what we do, is we put the assumption of the first year, which was actually 1.5, the second year was 1.75, I believe, if Mr. Hole corrects me, that's correct. So that is our best guess over the 4 years of what we can do now. The reality is, obviously budgets change. So this year, potentially have a 3.5% increase. Next year it could be something completely different. Again, we need to do a 4-year projection, and it's impossible to do that projection guessing on information. But that's what we need to do when we do those figures. Best guess is that is what a 4-year projection is, and that information does change from year to year. So I can understand how you might be frustrated that it's not following year to year. Now, Mr. Hum, sorry, you've asked your question. Thank you for your question, Mr. Hum. And that's all the questions. Councillors, 7 declarations of conflicts of interest.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to declare a conflict with item 15.1, confidential reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Any other conflicts of interest?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to declare a conflict on item 14.7, Heritage Grant Application Recommendation, 28 Avonmore Avenue, Portland.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillors, page 7, confirmation minutes. There's a recommendation there. Thank you, Councillor Hawker.
I move the recommendation that the minutes of the council meeting held on Tuesday, 28th of March 23, as circulated, be confirmed.
Thank you, Councillor Hawker. Is there a seconder?
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. All those in favour? So carried, 7-0. Petitions nil, deputations nil, notice of motions nil, petitions nil, committee reports nil. Councillors, page 8, management reports. There's a recommendation there. Councillor Smith.
Happy to move the recommendation, Mr. Mayor.
On page 8?
Yeah, 14.1.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that?
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Rank. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Smith?
No, I'm fine, Mr. Mayor. It's
Thank you.
procedural.
Anyone else? Right. All those in favour? So carried, 7-0. Councillors, item 14.2 on page 10, there's a recommendation there. Thank you, Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd move the recommendation that Council receives the Councillors' Quarterly Expenditure Report for the period of 1 January 2023 to the 31st of March 2023.
Thank you, Councillor.
Second motion.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Carr, would you like to? Yes.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. This is just a requirement under the Local Government Act that council for expenses and allowances are tracked and reported. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's certainly one that's showing our transparency of where the money does go across the board to all the councillors and the mayor itself.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any other councillors like to speak? All those in favour? So carried, 7-0. Councillors, item 14.3 on page 13, there's a recommendation there. Councillor Carr.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move that Council receives the financial report for the period ending March 2023.
Thank you, Councillor Carr.
Happy to second, Mr
Thank
Mayor.
you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, we're just looking at the March to date figures here. So we're looking at year to date on the comprehensive income statement. Surplus is higher than year to date forecast by 1.5 million. That's primarily driven by employee costs and materials and services costs being a bit lower than is expected at this point in time. The capital works year to date, we're at 8.8 million, which would probably suggest we're not going to meet the 35.18 million to the forecast budget, so there'll be some carryover as we get towards the end of the year. Thank you.
Councillor Stevens.
Happy with that.
Councillor, any further comments? All those in favour? So carried 7-0. Councillors, item 14.4 on page 15, there's a recommendation there. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move that Council give notice of the preparation of draft fees and charges 2023-24 and that we release the draft fees and charges for for public consultation in accordance with Council's community engagement policy from Friday the 28th of April to Friday the 26th of May 2023.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Wait a second. Thank you, Councillor Roke. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The fees and charges, quite a comprehensive document. Some of our fees are statutory fees, which are set down by the government. Other fees are our own fees, such as, registration of cats and dogs, etc., and our sale yards fees, etc. But look, a very comprehensive. Remember, Council does provide well over 120 services to our community every day, and some of those services attract a fee. So this is just our public consultation. These fees and charges belong to part of the budget. So as we do, they go out at the same time as the budget.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Roke.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. To Councillor Stevens' point, those services equate to 400 fees, in fact, that we've deliberated over. The fees, some of them have increased by 3.5, some of them haven't increased, and some of them have decreased. So that equates to an average increase of 1.08. To put it into perspective of the budget, which people are clearly interested in, it equates to only 5.8% of our revenue, which is $3.2 million. Of that $3.2 million, 2.8 of it is taken up in waste charges. So, that's why, waste is very expensive to this council. And over the years, we've been very financially mature with regards to paying down the debt for our land transfer station. So that's good to see that moving forward we'll only have an annual fee there. So again, as Councillor Stevens said, is that it's the opportunity for people to drill down, have a look at those fees, whether they think they should stay the same, etc. But at the end of the day, we're trying to do cost recovery. So thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor, councillors, any Councillor Carr?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Only a couple of things to add. Look, it's just over the 400 fees, as has already been stated, that the average increase over all our 400 fees was just 1.08%. And there has been a move on a number of items so that we can achieve full cost recovery, which I know has been stated, but it's very important that we're not out of pocket. Examples like if somebody leaves a car that's been dumped, there is a cost associated on that, and we do need to recover those costs. And there's also been a reduction in some areas, like cat and dog registrations, to encourage some uptake there. But I do like the document. I am looking forward to the feedback. It's very transparent about what things are going to cost or may cost. So please take the time to have a look, and hopefully we get some submissions and we can make changes as required. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. The other councillors, further comments? All good. All those in favour? So carried 7-0. Councillors, item 14.5, recommendation on page 17. Councillor Rank.
Mr Mayor, I'm happy to move the recommendation on page 17. Councillor's happy for me to just 1, 2, 3, 4, or would you like to?
Sure.
Happy with that?
Happy.
1, 2, 3, 4.
In its
Moving
entirety.
recommendation items 1, 2, 3 and 4. Do we have a seconder?
Yeah, happy to second that.
Councillor Smith. Councillor Rank.
And apologise, I have the wrong glasses with me, so they're often on all night. I can't see a thing. But I can see the budget papers, and I can talk to it because we've been deliberating over it for some time, and I think that's where I'd like to start the discussion with the Mayor and CEO's introduction. As it says there on the second paragraph, a great deal of work has been completed by this council. And yes, that is true. I can vouch for that. At the end of the completion of our previous budget, we committed to working on this budget, and we have been doing that. We have had the opportunity to have input into it and to look at cost savings. Cost savings because just like people have articulated to us and all of us are aware, there are cost of living pressures and they are significant, but council is not immune to these costs. For example, and you will see in that commentary that we have had increases in things like the consumer has, but significantly in the area of fuel and utility costs, 400k. That's an increase, not a total cost. Public lighting, it increased 125. Licence and software, as we've had discussions around moving forward with our digital connectivity, 100,000. The statutory obligations that we have that cover things like superannuation and increases in wages, 400,000. It doesn't take long to see that these costs have equated to $2 million. These are fixed costs that we have to try and recover. And when you have a look at the commentary in there, if we go with a 3.5% rate increase, that will only equate to 845k. So there's a very big difference there. So we've got to look at other ways to make savings. But sometimes these savings are not all about money. And the example of that was with regards to the home and aged care services. This was a decision that this council had to make because of regulatory changes imposed by the federal government. Okay, it wasn't a cost savings, and comments that were made on Facebook were very inappropriate that we were trying to save money, and that is definitely not the case, especially from my perspective. Okay, it is. We were making a risk management plan there moving forward. Building a sustainable financial position for this council for this year and for the outward years is a responsibility that this council needs to ensure occurs. That is why I was supporting the budget, and like our other councillors have said, with regards to the fees and charges, is encourage people to provide feedback through that community consultation process that I'm sure others will talk about. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Rank. Councillor Smith, would you like to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I also support this draft version of the budget. It is a draft, and we're going to put it out for public consultation. And I encourage as many people as possible to give us that feedback in ways so that we can, modify the budget where possible to exploit the areas of the community that particular people or community groups may want to expand. So we can only do so much from in the building, and we're in the business of people. So we need that feedback and that relationship between the community to work out the best for both parties, because as you stated earlier, part of the budget process is ensuring viability of council. So we've got to ensure we do that, but we also have to make sure that we're doing the right thing by the community. So Councillor Rank factually has everything that I was probably going to add to that. So I guess my thing is I hope everybody can reach out and offer some feedback on the budget, especially those that are around my age group. Council budget is not something that you're probably too enthused about. So jump on board and take a look at it, because although this is only year 2023, this does impact the future of everybody. So hopefully that we can put a budget together that the community approves of and that puts us in good stead for whoever we hand the torch to next, because it may not be us.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillors, just before we proceed, I was supposed to ask, is there anyone opposed to the motion? Before we proceed, none opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor, any other councillors like to provide comment? Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The motion is a pretty much procedural motion in that we need to take the budget, out to our constituency for consultation. Now, Mr. Mayor, last year the farming sector differential was changed, which meant, well, it's changed to a differential, which meant a collection for this council, a windfall for this council of over $3.4 million. This budget also includes another $3.4 million, so there's $6.8 million in the two budgetary years. And Mr. Mayor, this council has been overspending for a number of years, and it has crept up on us, Mr. Mayor, and we have got that much happening. We have got a significant amount of carry forwards with capital works that we've never ever seen before. And Mr. Mayor, after the adoption of the last budget, that's when people came to me complaining. I'd ask them, you make a submission to council if you're not happy with the rate cap of 3.5% above the downfall of the outcome that befell our ratepayers last year, and that included nearly 20% plus for most. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Wilson. Councillors, any further comment? Councillor Carr, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity to speak in relation to the draft budget. Look, it's no secret that family budgets and those of the ratepayers are being stretched at the moment for various reasons. So I just want to start with the out-of-pocket expenses, because that's a concern for a lot of ratepayers. So the general ratepayer, the out-of-pocket expense under this draft budget is $44 per annum. That's 84 cents per week. The primary production sector, that's $112 per annum, so it's $2.15 per week. So that's after applying the 3.48% increase to rating revenue, which is proposed in this draft budget. There is a deficit of $226,000 on the comprehensive income statement, which is obviously not ideal. There's been considerable effort put in by the council group and the ET team over the past 2 to 3 months to arrive at this figure, which is primarily driven by the fixed costs going up by $2 million and the forecasting of outgoing expenses which may be encountered during the HAC services transition. So we'll stop there. My understanding from the community is those that currently have general waste collection is that they want a green waste bin. And I do thank Mr. Jowett for bringing it up earlier. We do understand what the cost is for that service, and it is listed in the commentary. It's $85 per annum per user. The green bins have been excluded from this draft budget, but if you want your green bin, let us know in your submission. Just be aware it's a user pay system and everyone has to opt in, and it'll cost everyone $85 because there's no funds available from the state government to help us implement a green bin at the moment. If you'd like to see more trees, the tree people have left. I like trees. I think everyone likes trees. If you want to see more native trees, put it in your submission. I'd love to see native trees from bush bin tours into Flinders Park as you drive into Portland again. Look at the statement of cash flows. It shows 5.644 million at the end of year, 7 million of borrowings, and assumes all capital works will be completed in FY24. Historically, that doesn't happen in terms of capital works completion. So there may be some carryover in terms of the capital at the end of the year, which generally means we won't need to borrow any funds, but we must forecast the borrowings just in case. How am I going for time, Mr Mayor?
You are right on your time, so if you'd like to have a mover and a second to
No,
extend the time.
extension, please.
I'm happy to move the extension for
Second
councillor
that.
Carr.
Thank you, Councillor Hawker. Keep going, Councillor Carr.
Thank you.
All those in favour?
Which moves on to capital works. Look, there's 3 million allocated to advocate for priority projects, which this council crew put together as part of our 4-year plan. And we'll continue to advocate for those, the multi-purpose round ball facility, aquatic facilities, you know, those key projects. And we continue to provide infrastructure that will be used to meet the needs of our community for the next 50 years. You know, there's some carry forward projects there. Portland Foreshore multi-purpose facility, you know, we're working hard on that at the moment. Alexander Park redevelopment, stage 2 of the Cape Bridgewater landscaping and pathways. We've got the Portland North Industrial Precinct. We'll continue to put funds into local freight roads, and we've got the lighting and ceremonial space down on the foreshore. Yeah, we've got 375Ks for building works, 1.1 million for plant and equipment renewals. The list just goes on. There's a lot in this budget. It is a draft budget. We do have some scope to make some change. So I look forward to your submissions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. The other councillors like to comment? Thank you, Councillor Hawker.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to thank our CEO and David and all your finance team and all the staff that actually got together and banded together to make this draft budget happen. So thank you. I appreciate you.
Hear, hear.
Correct. Hear. Thank you, councillors. I know it's not...
Mr Mayor.
Councillor Stevens.
Councillor Stevens. Sarah, Councillor Stevens.
Did you not think I was going to say something? Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors. Look, it's been a long haul to get this budget out, and even though it is with some disappointment that I stand here and say, you know, over $10 million will be coming from primary production and general land, $13 million. I understand that this is a Portland-based council, but when we look at the carry forward projects and we look at those projects, it would be remiss of me not to identify the fact that there is very little in this budget for any opportunities for projects to be completed outside of the Portland base. The carry forward projects are Portland Foreshore, Alexander Park, Bridgewater Landscaping, Portland North. Yes, we have local freight roads. Thank you very much. There's lighting and ceremonial spaces. There are small projects for outside of Portland, but this has to stop. It has to. We have a large rate base that is across the whole of the Shire. We represent the whole of this Shire, not just a Portland base. So whilst I stand here and say, yes, we've worked hard on this budget, please, we have a number of strategies and a number of plans out there for walking trails and projects across this Shire, and every part of this Shire needs a little bit of a lift.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Since all councillors have had a chance to say something, I know it's not generally the place for the chair to speak on an issue, but I wouldn't mind actually having a few words. I think Councillor Rank actually covered off nearly all of my points. You were very thorough there, Councillor Rank. But what I do want to do is go over a letter, or summarise a letter from the local government minister to all Victorian councils, that an independent body, the ESC, recommended that the minimum rate cap be actually set at 4% due to the considerable cost increases that LGAs are facing. They, like the broader community, are not immune to cost increases, and Councillor Rank stipulated right there. There was just a few things she rattled off. that equated to $2 million increase. I mean, that is huge. And then you look at the fact that it might possibly be a 3.5% increase, which equates to around $850,000. For anyone doing maths in that's a $1.15 million shortfall on the previous year. I mean, that is huge. If you look at other increases across that council has to bear, if we were looking to do the same thing with the same amount of money next year, we're looking at a multi-million dollar debt level. That is obviously wasn't an option for this council. So we've made some serious cutbacks, obviously, and to get it back to a $226,000 level in the red. That was quite a feat, which I thank the CEO and the exec team for making some of those tough choices as well. But for anyone to suggest not to have a 3.5% rate increase, that has compounding effects into the future. And this council's got some serious issues when it comes to, and I think one of the people in the gallery mentioned its assets. We've got nearly, we commit to a 43% of our asset renewal requirements. That's nearly a $7 million shortfall to actually get it up to 100%. Now, that might be a bit of doom and gloom, but we've got a plan to actually rectify that going into the future, to have surpluses. We've had deficits over the last couple of years, but as this plan shows, we're looking to bring that back in the black, and that is what this budget is about. It's a responsible budget that looks at steadying this ship and some serious issues that need to be addressed in the future, and that is like the Haywood Pool, that is like the Portland Basketball Stadium, that is like, and 10 years post that, we've got the Portland Leisure and Aquatic Centre. These assets are not new assets, they are aged assets, and we need to think about planning for them now, and that is what we're looking to do with this budget. Now, if you look on the face of it, straight off the bat, you can see there's a $2 million discrepancy with recurring grants, and council relies on recurrent grants. A lot of regional councils require at least 50% of recurrent grants to operate. That's just a fact of life. We don't have the financial abilities metropolitan councils have with parking and fines, so we can't generate millions of dollars of revenue we require on these grants to operate. If you look, obviously, we transitioned out of hack services. That was obviously pushed by the federal government and changes there. But that's a nearly $800,000 possible fee there that we need to budget for. And all of a sudden, you look at $2 million increase, you're looking at $800,000 there. This would have been a positive budget if we didn't have these costs. So I wish to, again, thank the CEO and the exec team to do a marvellous job for what we have. But again, this is a budget that we need to steady the ship. Thank you, councillors. So all those in favour of the recommendation? So passed 7-0. Councillors, item 14.6 on page 20. There's a recommendation there. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendation tabled on page 20 in its entirety, items 1 through to 8.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Carr.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Stevens, would you like to speak to it?
I don't intend to read it out, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Look, this is quite a unique scheme, the Strathdale Drainage Scheme. It's only one of two in the whole of Victoria, and this is just putting out for public consultation the $16,000 revenue for this financial year, which will be charged against those particular properties within the Strathdale Drainage Scheme area.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Carr, would you like to add?
Nothing further.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Anyone else? All those in favour? So carried 7-0. Item 14.7, page 23, councillors, there's a recommendation there.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to declare a conflict for this item, please.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the council approve the grant application of $2,000 from the Heritage Grants and Loans Restoration Fund for the conservation works at 28 Avonmore Avenue, Portland, in accordance with the recommendations in Council's Heritage Advisory Report and relevant permits.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Do we have someone to second that? Councillor Hawker, thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I do admire the Avonmore homestead. It is a state significant homestead in Portland, although it's been many years since I've actually been to that property. But it is a highly significant building, and excuse me, I do thank the owners for doing the maintenance work that is required. Now, for those that are listening on the wide web, the Avonmore homestead was notably designed by the Portland architect Daniel Nicholson for surgeon George Wilson, and this was back in the 1800s.
Is he related?
But the repairs, Mr Mayor, will certainly bring back some of the areas that need that repair. The $2,000, Mr Mayor, I think that might be the last kick of the bucket for this financial year, particularly.
Correct.
And I think this grant scheme has gone really well, in the last 12 to 18 months. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Very well indeed. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Hawker, would you like to add any commentary there?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I concur with everything that Councillor Wilson has said. The only thing I can add is this application meets all eligible requirements of the Heritage Support Policy. So there you go.
Fair enough. Thank you, Councillor Hawker. Anyone else like to speak to? Thank you, Councillor Wright.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry?
Go on.
No.
No, go on.
Sorry, was there any opposition? Sorry.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens.
Look, Mr Mayor, I won't remain quiet here. I mean, I don't support this. This particular, it might meet all the requirements, but it certainly doesn't pass the pub's test. And these improvements will go ahead regardless of whether we put $2,000 into this. This particular applicant has already had funds from council previously in the last little while. So, you know, I don't support this, and I think that it's a reflection of, you know, the conservation works that need to be done. They will be done.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I too thank the applicant for making the application. I can't support it, as the applicant has already received, you know, $5,000 previously. You know, the ratepayers, hard-earned ratepayer money, we've only got $2,000 left in this fund, and I want to, you know, our grant money, I want to see it go to as many ratepayers, and when we give funds out, as many people in the community as possible. So I can't support this one either. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Wright.
Yes, speaking for
yes.
Yes, for Councillor Wilson may have the right to reply. I think the point is with regards to, as Councillor Hawker said, in accordance with the recommendations in Council's Heritage Advisors report. So on that basis, I am compelled. Having said that, and Councillor Wilson, you said that this has been a very successful grant, and over well, you said, and I think this may not be the place for this time for this conversation, but it may be that we do need to have a conversation around how it's administered and if it's serving the purpose that it was set up to many years ago, and it's a great program, but I think it's time for a review of some sort. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rank. Right, a reply, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I'll close if you like, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Mayor, and he shot me. He shot me. Although the applicant has received a small grant, it does not mean that he is ineligible, or he and she is not ineligible, because there is a joint partnership of ownership of this property. In every aspect, the applicant has ticked all the boxes, as Councillor Hawker has said. The aspects of painting, we do not, and that was one of the recent changes, we do not give grant money for paintwork. So that's been taken out of it. So the works are actual maintenance works that are listed, proper works as inscribed by our policy for that grant. And Mr. Mayor, in previous years, a grant like this would have received the full $5,000. As I said, we've only got $2,000 left in the bucket. So that's I understand councillors that may wish to go against this motion, but I stand to support the property, the historical state significant property. That's why I am so strong in support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Put it to the vote, councillors. All those in favour of the motion? Those against? So recorded. Do you require for a division? No. That's okay.
Yeah. Can somebody get Councillor Smith?
Recorded 14. Mary, go around. Councillor Smith, councillors, recommendation page 25. Councillor.
Sorry.
Councillor Carr.
Got a conflict of interest.
Yeah, when we get to
We'll
the
go
item,
close
we
the
can do
meeting
that.
first.
Certainly.
Close the
We'll just get to
Close the
the
meeting
recommendation about closing the meeting.
Sorry.
Slow down, mate. Slow down.
Councillor, that's it's going to be a recommendation move.
Yep, sorry.
Councillor Smith, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy to move item 15, recommendation that the council meeting be closed to members of the public pursuant to section 62, so on.
Etc.
Happy to second this.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Any opposed? All those in favour? All right, thank you very much. We now close the council to the members of the public to deliberate this in-camera decision.